of the Lord.
Our first reading for this Sunday is taken from the book of Sirach. We would like to reflect on this important virtue called humility. But I would like to propose to everyone this theme: choose humility. Choose it. It will not come to us by chance. We have to choose it. In the first reading, we find an outright declaration coming from the author of the book of Sirach. Be humble. Be a humble person. Conduct your affairs with humility. You see, it comes as an advice and even as a command. You have to choose humility. As I said at the beginning, humility, while an ideal and a desire for many of us, will not come to us by chance. We have to exert the effort to choose it and to live by it. In the first reading, we find very, in a way, human ways of understanding humility. One such way is this: know your limits. There are things beyond you that you are not capable of, and so do not ambition to reach those things. So knowing your limits. The other thing that the book of Sirach says is, if something is too sublime for you, seek it not. No? Again, put some limits to your ambitions. Do not think of yourself in an unrealistic, magnanimous way, which is not really your true self. So by your realism, by your honesty, you will also know where you stand and where to stop. Here comes another advice. The greater you are, the more humble you should be. So, your greatness, your achievements, your capacities are not an excuse, according to this author, for you to become proud. In fact, for him, the test of true greatness is in the capacity to remain humble and simple in the clear signs of your greatness. This is quite different from what the world tells us. Some people will even say, oh, you have achievements? Flaunt them. You have capacities? Flaunt them and make people notice you and make people admire you. Here, the greater you are, the more humble you should be. That is a sign of true greatness. Again, the author says, people love the humble more than those who have given them a lot. Yes, people admire and love the so-called benefactors. But whom do people really admire and keep close to their hearts? The humble ones, the simple ones. And finally, why do we strive to be humble? Aside from all of these seemingly human reasons for keeping humility as a virtue and choosing it, the bottom line is this: it pleases God. That's the spiritual element here. As human beings, we take delight in humble people. And the author of the book of Sirach seems to be telling us it is not just human beings who love to be in the company of the humble and the simple. God Himself rejoices whenever God sees a humble person. And this humble person will be made great by God. You humble yourself before humanity, and God, who sees your humble heart, will exalt you. That is the response of God to a humble person.
Of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday is taken from the letter to the Hebrews. We are reflecting on the theme, Choose Humility. And this comes out very clearly in the first reading from the book of Sirach. Humility is not just pleasing to the eyes of human beings who detect it in someone. Humility also pleases God. In the second reading, we have some images which may lead us to a clearer understanding of humility. While the second reading does not talk openly or explicitly about humility, I think through the interplay of images employed by the author, we are also given a deep insight into humility, especially the humility of our Lord Jesus Christ. The second reading presents to us some sort of a contrast between the old law given to the people Israel through Moses and the new law, the new covenant, which comes to us through Jesus Christ. Remember the event in the Exodus, how the law, the commandments were communicated to the people. Recall the scenery. And the letter to the Hebrews reminds the readers and the hearers, remember the untouchable mountain. You should not come close to the mountain, you will die. And then the presence of God, accompanied with blazing fire, with smoke, with trumpet blasts, even with earthquakes, with lightning. Who would not feel afraid? You are before the great God. And the people just tremble. And they cover their faces for fear that they would die when they see God, when they touch this mighty mountain. That was part of the spiritual and religious mindset of the Old Testament times, which is not bad at all. It is part of how God is revealed, the mighty one, the one who exercises power over all. And so when His Word is revealed, then that Word is accompanied by signs of power and authority, making people feel small. But then, the letter to the Hebrews says, comes the day when the new covenant is presented to us. And the approach is quite different. Instead of this untouchable mountain that generates fear, we are being asked to approach the holy city, Jerusalem, Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. And there you find a gathering, a banquet, a sign of communion, a sign of family, a sign of peace and joy, of fluid conversation, exchange of not only stories, but also the goods of the earth. And there you have angels, messengers of God, mingling with human beings. And you find God and the mediator, Jesus Christ, the host of the meal, the mighty one, coming in the form of a simple lamb, coming in the form of the crucified servant of God, the mighty one, now hosting a banquet for everyone, but showing His humility as the one who has first offered Himself as food for the soul. My dear brothers and sisters, the second reading, through the use of images, tells us that we can go to that banquet. We can eat with Jesus, who became humble, Remember the many times Jesus ate with people, especially with sinners. This is the God that we have. This is the feast that is being offered to us. It is hosted by the humble one, and we can come as poor, as simple, as sinners.
Gospel of the Lord.
Our gospel passage for this Sunday comes from the Gospel of St. Luke. We are reflecting on the theme of choosing humility. Choosing humility. We have to decide to be humble. It will not come to us by chance. In the first reading from the book of Sirach, we see that humility is a human virtue involving a lot of human choices, like being honest with myself, not ambitioning things that are beyond my capacities, knowing my limits. And for the book of Sirach, the greater a person is, the more humble he or she should be. For humility is a true sign of greatness. And to cap it all, humility is pleasing to God's eyes. A humble person is not only attractive to other human beings, humility catches the eye of God, and God gives favors to a humble person. In the second reading, through the use of images, we find in the letter to the Hebrews this contrast between how the people Israel experienced the presence of the mighty God in the revelation of the commandments. It was an intimidating presence. But then in the new covenant, we have the focus on Jesus, the humble one, the servant, the crucified one, the lowly Lamb of God, now hosting a friendly banquet between human beings, the holy ones, and the angels. And this is centered on the one who became a human being like us, so that we could be part of the banquet in heaven. As though the gates of heaven were opened to us, thanks to the humble Jesus. In the Gospel, Jesus is presented as a guest in a dinner. And Jesus notices how some of the guests were looking for the best seats, or the seats of honor in the table. This becomes an occasion for Jesus to give a parable. In fact, two parts, all leading us to valuable lessons about humility and purity of intentions when we deal with other people. The first part of the parable goes this way. I guess we're all familiar with it. When you are invited to a wedding banquet, do not choose for yourself the seat of honor. Okay, do not choose the seat of honor, for that reveals your self-image. You probably are thinking of all the guests here, of the 250 guests here, I am the most important. And because I think of myself that way, I automatically choose the best seat, telling myself, you deserve it. It is for you, because believe me, you are the most honorable guest here. Now, Jesus says, don't do that, for you might be put in an embarrassing situation. A guest more honorable than you might come, and the host will tell you, sir, ma'am, will you please stand up and go to a lower seat, because this one is reserved for my guest of honor. Now, how embarrassing it is for you. But I guess this is also common sense. If someone is in his or her right sense, you would not appoint yourself as the guest of honor. But I guess also, some people think of themselves that way. And they demand that they be treated as guests of honor. But Jesus is telling us, do not choose to be that. Do not even think of yourself as that. Wait for the host to bring you up in a way to exalt you to a higher position. What should we choose? We should choose the lowest seat. And the honor is a gift to us coming from the host. This is an important lesson, my dear brothers and sisters. Choose the lowest seat, and the honor is not for us to seek. It is a gift. It will be given to us by the host. And in this case, it will be given to us by God. Don't seek honor. Seek humility. And God will do the rest if we deserve honor. Now, the second part of the parable is about, again, a meal. So it's not just us being guests in the meal, but this time, how about if you are the host of the meal? Whom will you invite? Now, Jesus tells us something that is very normal. We usually invite family, friends, benefactors. In other words, we invite those who belong to our group, who belong to our class. But by choosing these people, unconsciously, we are also eliminating other people. Those whom probably we will not admit verbally, but de facto, these are people whom we have excluded from our inner group. And Jesus tells us in this reading, instead of inviting our relatives, our friends, and the rich, why not invite the poor, the lame, the crippled? And what is the motivation? Not just charity. Not just because these are the people who probably need more food. Our friends, our relatives, and the rich ones, maybe they're already trying to avoid food. But not only for charity. Jesus says, you invite these people because they will not be able to repay you. Whereas those who have means will surely think of inviting you to their place. That happens, huh? When you have guests who are rather well off, when the dinner is over, they will already reciprocate your kindness. They'll say, oh, next time, it will be in my house. They will invite you in turn. But Jesus says here, whereas the poor won't be able to reciprocate. But again, some of us will say, but that's normal. How can they reciprocate? Here is the clincher. Jesus ends the parable by saying, you should be pleased that they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid in the resurrection of the just. Again, the purification of motivation. I may be doing good to neighbors externally, but am I expecting recognition? Am I expecting a reward? Again, lack of humility. And Jesus is saying, leave it up to God to reward you. So, leave it up to God to extol you, to give you honor. And for all your good deeds, leave it to God to reward you and repay you. So we are being told to be pure in heart, to be humble and joyful in all our activities and in all of our caritative actions. Jesus knows that as human beings, We deserve honor, but it can be a trap towards pride. Jesus knows that as human beings, we can be affirmed by people who recognize our good works and who reciprocate our goodness. But again, it could be a trap. I could be doing good works simply for the desire for recognition and repayment. Jesus is saving us by telling us, be humble. And if you do good things, do them with disinterestedness. You are disinterested in any recognition or in any adulation. You know, I had an experience of this when I was a new worker in the Vatican. You know, I was, of course, quite timid. And in one meeting that I attended, the first session was, you just introduce yourselves, no? And I was in the company of people who were known and whose places were known, big cities, big centers of learning, etc. When it came to me, I said, I'm Professor Tagle from Imus. And all of them looked at me and said, where is that? Never heard. I said, oh, it's a place in the Philippines. It's near Manila, all of those, no? Then you just keep your profile low. You do what you can. I knew my capacities. When they asked me to do things that I knew I could not do well, I just plainly told them, oh no, that's beyond me, etc. No? And then I became a bishop. And in one meeting, no, with other bishops, the facilitator, a cardinal, looked at me, and before I could introduce myself, the cardinal asked me, oh, Bishop, how is Imus? All of a sudden, people knew about it without me having to blow the trumpet. I come from this place, I come from this place. You just wait. Do your share, humbly, quietly, and well. And before you know it, people see you in your littleness. But it is not of your making. It will be given to you by God when you need it and when He sees fit. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it.